Minister Gaston Browne, it is a pleasure to have you joining me on the Trailblazers.
A pleasure, my dear.
Thank you so much. We were talking off air and I was mentioning that you're actually the second regional leader that I've had on the program.
I'm honored.
All right. And I'm honored myself. It is indeed a privilege. All right. So as Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, I know many look up to you. You have actually been the leader there since 2014. But at the same time, I understand that you actually grew up, very rough, like you had a rough upbringing. So for those of us who may not know, share with us about your early beginnings.
Well, I'd say I had a very exciting upbringing that would have contributed to my practicality and at the same time would have helped me to develop a significant amount of resilience to the extent that I'm not easily daunted by challenges. Having grown up in a single parent home with a mother who was mentally ill, I had to fend for myself at an early age. In fact, my mother became mentally ill when I was 9 years old. And, I was practically on my own. I had to literally raise myself to some extent. In fact, I became the errand boy within the community to run errands to earn, a few cents, buy a half bread and butter, drink a little pipe water. So one of the things my humble upbringing taught me to is to be, contented. And you'll find, for example, that, as a youngster growing up, it didn't take much to satisfy me. I wasn't into, any significant amount of consumption. Even as an adult now, my consumption extremely limited because I recognize that the things that we crave for, especially those that we cannot afford, in many instances, they're really not necessary. I mean, they're just things that we gravitate to maybe because of peer pressure, and maybe all of the social media and general media pressures. So again, I think that, my upbringing, though, characterized by poverty, I mean, it was an upbringing that helped to build resilience and to make me appreciative of the simpler things in life and not to be involved in profligate consumption. Yes. And at the same time, too, to keep me humble.
Indeed, I appreciate you being so authentic and sharing that because I myself actually did not even know that. So, I mean, especially the issue of mental illness. Luckily, we've come a far way where people are more understanding of it. But I'm sure at that time as a youngster, the stigma alone must have been quite an issue for you.
Well, it is true that, my peers tried to stigmatize me to some extent based on the fact that, my mother was mentally ill. Even as a young politician, there are people who labeled me as crazy in inverted commas. And that obviously was because of my mom's illness. So it was utilized against me to obviously try and subdue me and to, in essence, my political opponents are trying to get a leg up on me. But, even in school, it was not a problem. I had a very good social life as a youth. Would have completed, my schooling despite the difficulties, and I was involved in social activities and sports. So for some reason, I was not bothered by the banter from my, my fellow students. And as an adult, by that time, I was so hardened. By the time I entered into politics, my political opponents would use it against me. It just did not work, So for some reason, I can't say that, I saw it as a form of bullying, that individuals tried to bully me based on the conditions of my, let's say, both the situation of poverty and the mental condition of my mother. I know nowadays, every little issue is considered to be bullying. I mean, I saw it at the time as a form of teasing, grinding, as we call it locally. And for me, it was not an issue. And it was like, water off a duck's back.
Yes.
I mean, they even used to tease us about the foods that we ate at the time, very inexpensive foods, and even the dilapidated home that we lived in. So, I grew up being ridiculed But again, I think it would have prepared me for a political career. Not that I had any such aspiration to become a politician. In fact, I became involved in politics fortuitously. But in hindsight, that type of ridicule would have helped to thicken my hide. And even at this stage in my political career, the things that I said about me, they do not create any worry. I mean, I lead quite a diverse life in terms of my various interests, and family certainly is one of my major interests. I mean, I pay a lot of attention to my family, make sure that I keep my family together and empower them as much as I can, and generally to serve and empower the people of Antigua and Barbuda, even those in the wider Caribbean who we serve.
Indeed, Prime Minister Browne. And I love the word that you used earlier in terms of the resilience. And we're going to touch a little bit later in terms of the political aspect. But talk to us also about the role that your grandmother played then with the absence of your mother,
Right. Yeah. So, I went to live full time with my mother when I was about 13 years of age. But prior to that, I would have lived with my great-grandmother, who was born in 1894. She died when I was about 13. So thereafter, I went to live with my mom. For a short period as well. I mean, I would have lived briefly with my mother during that period, 1 to 13. Now, my great-grandmother, as I said, was born in 1894. She was partially blind and illiterate. So when she went to the bank, for example, to withdraw the few dollars that she may have had, so for example, she would have had 2 children at the time who sent her like a £10 or $20 to help her. That is how she survived from the remittances. But what would have happened in that case, whenever she went to the bank, she had to use a thumbprint to withdraw the money because she was literally illiterate. And again, I think I was lucky in that she kept me at home for a number of years. In fact, I literally started my formal schooling at age 8 because at the time, my great-grandmother, who, as I said, was born in 1894, she didn't understand the significance of education.
Yes.
So she kept me at home, and I was her little pet, literally, and she didn't see the need to send me to school. In fact, the area in which we lived at the time, Grace Farm, Green Bay area, she thought that the public school was a little too rough and she didn't want to expose me. So she thought she was doing a good thing, keeping me at home. And then again, she didn't have the capacity to teach me anything. So my mom, recognizing, and this is, even though my mom was mentally ill, she's not stupid, but recognizing that I was actually out of school for an extended period, my mom then came and took me to live with her in another ghetto area. And that's when I started my primary school at the Villa Primary School. And I had the indignity of being moved from one class to another. So for example, they started me in Junior 1B. And the teacher at the time thought I was brilliant. I mean, obviously I had good absorptive capacity. So I was able to catch on the work that was taught at the time. So but by the second term, she decided to move me into 1A, where the work was a little more difficult. But I didn't have the type of the breadth of experience to do the work in 1A. So that the teacher for 1A then had to put me back in 1B. Because she didn't understand the history behind my education. The assumption was I was a bright little boy, but I had no depth. Anyway, subsequently, I got into the stream, and right throughout my schooling, I was able to do remarkably well. But I didn't have a particularly good start. I had a late start, I had a bad start. And there goes the resilience again, I mean, even though I started late, I was able to recover. And today, I think I'm a productive citizen of the region.
Indeed, more than productive citizen of the region. You're the Prime Minister of a nation. I mean, this is fascinating. And I'm just curious then, how is it that for somebody who grew up in such a situation, at what point did you make that transition then in terms of your studies, later moving on to even studying at the University of Manchester in the UK? How did that happen for you?
Well, I think there was some degree of natural ability because, I'm not a very studious person. And I felt that, I was able to catch up based on, I guess, natural ability. And from that standpoint, after having such a bad start, I became just as normal as any other student, having closed the gap, and was able to progress to the extent that I would have completed a master's degree successfully. So again, maybe it's a form of built-in resilience because I find myself, generally speaking, from the time I knew myself, not to be intimidated by anyone, notwithstanding the standing within the society. In fact, I recall one of my uncles said to me some years ago that, when I was a young teenager, he visited me at home. He was a well-known PhD and so on, well celebrated. But he said, whereas everybody was role playing to him, I just said to him, welcome, Uncle Winston. And in a matter of a few minutes, I was out on the road playing my sports.
Wow.
Worshiping him as the others. So
yes.
And again, I'm not disrespectful to people, but I mean, the type of situation which you role play and play this inferior role, it is not within my psyche. And again, I think I've accepted challenges, maybe because I've had so many. Yeah. I mean, I've had some near-death experiences as well.
What? Like what?
I'm told, for example, when I was pretty young, as a toddler, apparently I was very ill. And I believe, too, that is one of the reasons why I started school late. I mean, I started walking at about age 4. Apparently, I was very ill. And my mom said to me she had even given up on me at one point. And then she said after a period of time being hospitalized, I mean, she visited me on one occasion and saw, quite a bouncing baby boy and could not believe it was her child.
Wow.
So that was one occasion. In fact, what had happened too, my mom, found herself in an unfortunate situation which she could not have taken care of me at the time. And I ended up having a malnutrition. So even on my official health card, they would have documented the fact that I was underdeveloped. At the time, I think that particular card was about 2 years old. And I was underdeveloped and I was diagnosed with malnutrition. So I think it stunted my growth to some extent. And, by the time I was 4 years old, I was still underdeveloped. But for some reason, again, grew out of it and became quite a healthy young man. And, as I say, hit wood. I mean, I'm still in relatively good health up to this day. So I give thanks.
Yes.
Again, the resilience. And I can't tell you where that resilience came from. I mean, it is something that happened. I mean, from the time I was a youth. I had a situation too in which on one occasion, in fact, my dear great-grandmother as well, who was born in 1894, she was an alcoholic. So she used to drink this very harsh white rum. But she used to give me a little of the rum for the worm, just a little corkful.
Yes.
So one occasion, she was stone drunk and I was in the house with her. And I went and drank off a whole pint of rum.
Wow.
They hospitalized me and pumped me out and so on. And again, so I was able to survive that as a youth. I may have been about 6 years old at the time.
Yes.
Then on another occasion, I almost suffered a near execution, electrocution, I should say rather, electrocution. Let me get it right. What happened, I held on to an electric wire, not knowing it was an electric wire. It didn't appear to be one. It was one of those uninsulated electric wires. It wasn't the contemporary type at the time, which I was accustomed to. It was apparently done several decades before. Very thin line, but it was an electric wire that was used to power a particular school building where we normally play in the courtyard. I was the first there. Saw this this wire, which I didn't recognize to be an electric wire, held it. And I had a situation which it actually burnt out the back of my hand, and I was there praying, couldn't let go of the wire. And there's a Rasta man at the time, a gentleman by the name of Kenya, who heard me praying, asking the Lord to save my life, and he came over and cut the wire, saved my life.
Wow!
So I've been through lots of squalls, but those squalls have made me a better person and a stronger person. And as I said, I'm just not daunted by anything. Even during the period of COVID, as most people were frightened by it, we respected it. But as I said to my colleagues, we had to learn to live and work with COVID. So it's not a coincidence that Antigua and Barbuda was the first country to reopen its borders on the 1st of June of 2020. It's because, we just weren't daunted by it, but resilience goes right back to resilience. So I'll say this, that my own experience has been a life of resilience, and I'm now using it too at the national level to help our country to deal with the challenges that arise from time to time.
Indeed, and I definitely appreciate that. That is definitely the theme for this interview, resilience.
Resilience.
And as we continue along that trajectory, in terms of your experience then being in London and then returning working in business, tell us about that, because first and foremost, you were a banker, if I should get that correctly, right?
Correct.
Yes, so tell us about your banking experience, your business side.
Right. So I left A-levels and applied to several banks, including the Swiss American Banking Group. And I got employed by the Swiss American Banking Group. That's a banking group that comprised of a domestic bank, an offshore bank, and a trust company. And after about 4 or 5 years there, I found myself, being elevated. I became a senior supervisor within the bank, to the extent the directors of the bank decided to give me a scholarship for us to do a banking degree and then subsequently a master's degree.
Wow.
And then after I completed my degree, they promoted me into management. So from about age probably 26, somewhere around there, I became a senior manager within the bank. And now I'll go back by stating here, after I left A-levels, I mean, my plans initially, was to do something in the field of science, probably biochemistry or maybe a chemist or something, because as my strong subjects were chemistry and biology. But obviously at that time, we didn't have any scholarship programs. Only one scholarship at the time, a national scholarship. So finding the funds to go to university, that was an impossibility. So I had to work. Yeah. And just like anyone else, I applied to the, in fact, I applied to airlines as well. And I know I was offered a job by American Airline as well as a bank. So I chose a bank job, which I felt was the best one, was the best choice. Eventually, as I said, found my way into senior management and would have had a good stint there. In fact, the only person who at the time was senior to me when I left the bank was a general manager. So, I was, I had a good stint, as a banker. And would have used the opportunity to help a number of people to establish your business and so on. So it was easily one of the most exciting things that I've done, serving as a banker. But interestingly too, I was always very entrepreneurial. So I also, while I was working at the bank, diversified into business and would have done a number of businesses in real estate. At one point too, I was part owner of a car company as well. So from about age 21, I actually started, my business career concurrently while working at the bank. Then, back in 1998, I had certain members of the Labour Party decided to pursue me about a political career. Initially, I turned it down because at that time I was making about 16,000 EC dollars a month. And I didn't see the need to get involved in politics. 16,000 EC is close to 6,000 US a month. And this is back in 1998. And maybe it was somewhat of a selfish decision too. And, having a good career path. I mean, I just didn't see the need. Anyway, they came back and insisted that I should, take a look at it and make a try. And I did participate in a primary, won the primary. And then was elected in 1999 for the first time. So I served in the Lester Bird administration for one term between 1999 and 2004. Served as the Minister of Planning and then subsequently the Minister of Planning and Trade until 2004 when we lost the elections.
That is very interesting because I remember you were saying that, well, you just said it, that when they approached you initially, you were not interested and politics was never something that you actually had in your plan. So
well, I tell you this much, prior to 1999 elections, I mean, I was not a registered voter, never voted, never went to a political meeting, never had any discussion with any politician, just minding my own business.
Wow, that isn't. So was it a difficult switch for you then, or you found it to be smooth?
Well, there were challenges, but again, I was never daunted. And some of the things that I had to endure, maybe, it would have caused, others to probably step back and change the course of action. But as I said, there's this, I don't know if it's a quiet determination about me. If I decide I'm going to do something, I'm going to get it done. And I don't worry about challenges. There will always be challenges. I mean, what is life without challenges? So, I mean, yes, there are a number of issues. In fact, myself and the then leader didn't get on very well because he felt I was a little too outspoken. Wow. But we're always very respectful of each other.
And that is the former Prime Minister Bird.
Correct.
Mr. Bird. Whose niece well, that's for another discussion further on.
Well, so I'm also very inclusive.
Yes.
And I do not carry malice, hatred.
Yes.
I'm very strident in my politics, but, inclusive in terms of embracing all. And you are right that at one point to Celeste and I, competed for the leadership. I challenged him and, as you know, defeated him in 2013 for the leadership of the Antigua and Barbuda party, or 2012 rather. It's November 2012. I defeated him. But I had run prior to 2012. I had actually challenged him 7 years before, and he defeated me. But coming back to the issue of resilience, by the way, he knew I was going to come back. So you would have found that during that period, our relationship was not the best because he knew I was coming back. He didn't know when.
Oh.
So he was always trying to keep me at bay, knowing, hey, he defeated me in 2005, but another challenge is going to come at some point. Mm-hmm. It came in 2012 when I defeated him and took over the leadership of the party. And then, one of my challenges going into the 2014 elections, I had to heal the party. I had to bring, everybody back together. So interestingly, after I defeated Celeste, and for me, it was not a personal vendetta. I just felt that, he had aged and the party needed fresh legs ago and, to take over the governance of the country. We needed to present fresh leadership. And I took the position at the time that, to spend the rest of my life in opposition or to spend 5 more years or 10 more years in opposition, definitely not. And I felt that I had a contribution to make towards the socioeconomic and political development of the country. So I decided to challenge him and was successful. So what I did after I defeated him, I placed him to sit ahead of me in the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda, made him our emeritus leader. And it was a mark of respect to him to let him know, yes, I've defeated you, but I'm very respectful of the contribution that you've made towards the development of our country. Mm-hmm. We subsequently made him into a national hero. So that, helped to subdue him to some extent because he was not a happy camper, after I defeated him, and he had his own whole team of supporters, some of whom are ministers today in my administration, who were supporting him and, who were literally trying to split the party. But again, I was successful in bringing the entire team together. So by the time 2014 came for the general elections, we were ready, united and ready, and we were able to defeat the incumbent UPP party. Now, you are right that in 2013, I married his niece, who incidentally is also the Minister of Housing and Lands, and Lady Maria Brown, most beautiful young lady. So, yes, again, I have to say here that, from the time I knew myself, I've characterized myself as a blessed person to the extent for many years, even up to now. My introductory political song is Mr. Vegas, I am blessed.
Yes, I love the blessing. Oh, very nice.
I do believe it. I believe that I'm blessed because, my life could have gone in any direction. Yes. But again, I would have exercised a significant amount of discipline, resilience, and love of people. I think that is what has helped as well. I mean, in as much as, I have the capacity to be very strident in my opposition to others. Generally speaking, it's not about any hatred, dislike, envy. It's just about a difference of opinion, and I could be strident about it. But notwithstanding that, after that issue is resolved, it is not resolved, we could be best of friends.
Definitely, and I really appreciate that. I mean, again, the word resilient comes up because to have been in opposition for 10 years and then come back and become, the leader, not only of the party, but winning the general election back in 2014. And since then serving as Prime Minister, that must be like mind-blowing for you. or it was something that you just expected
No,
to happen?
no, I would say mind blowing. I mean, I have very simple expectations, and but however, my work ethic is such that almost invariably, I will achieve my objectives, and they're not mind-boggling in the sense that I would have had at the back of my mind that whatever I pursue is achievable.
Yes.
I mean, I do not set unrealistic goals. And again, when I achieve them, I can't be surprised by them because I would have seen them to be achievable in the first instance.
Awesome.